was telling Danika that I feel like in my community career, I have spent maybe a little bit too much time shooting from the hip when it comes to user research. And I'm really stoked to be getting a little bit more formal idea of user research itself and what those interviews look like. And so we have Danika here. Danika's currently the design and UX researcher manager for Splunk observability at Splunk. And has worked at Waymo, Google, Stanford. She has more than 12 years of design leadership and UX research experience from high growth, high tech product development, and ensures the user need and novel insights are baked into product strategy, UX, and engineering roadmaps. She's a passionate designer and user researcher and is always seeking to make innovative impact while focusing on how to build and realize products. I don't think that does a justice to who Danika is, but without further ado, I'm going to turn the stage over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you guys. I was really excited to get invited to come and share about user research, especially about interviews, because they're my favorite type of user research. And I thought this community would be a great group. I mentioned it to Nikki. If you guys have questions while I'm talking, please just share them in the comments. I love that. It works really well for me. That's bad UI right there. Share, slideshow, same thing. So today I'll share with you guys a little bit about some of my tips and tricks on conducting user interviews. We'll talk a little bit about data too. But as Nikki mentioned, I'm a user research and design lead at Splunk. I've been working in research for a long time. Today I know you guys are all community leaders, right? So you're trying to organize and get people to engage and share your product and be evangelists. And talking to our customers, your customers are your evangelists, right? Is key. So let's talk a little bit about when and how to use user interviews, how to do them effectively, and then how to share that data and use it in ways that that'll make a difference. So these are some of the places I've worked, and all of them, talking to customers is really important, and they all use them really differently. Most recently, I'm working specifically with developers, our primary users. So hopefully some of the stories I have will resonate. But I also mentioned to Nikki that at Google, I did research on our forums, which is our tools that allowed users, like our Google's advocates and customers, to respond to other customers, which was really great. In all of these places, I was responsible for ensuring that people really loved the products that we were building and wanted to share them. So for anybody who doesn't know, user research is an entire discipline that uses a ton of different data methodologies to understand people's needs, their behaviors, their attitudes, to allow us to design and develop products that meet their needs. You can go to college to do this, you can get PhDs in it. Today though, and so just to kind of one other thing, don't read all of these things, but there is a ton of methods in user research. You can do all kinds of qualitative and quantitative type of methods. There are some things that study people's attitudes. There are things to study people's behaviors. Depending on the types of research questions you had about your product, you would choose a specific method. Today, we're just going to talk about this one area, which is user interviews. So don't think I'm going to teach you about all of user research today. We're going to talk specifically about how to use an interview to influence your product development. So first off, when should you do a user interview? Like, when is that an effective and useful thing for your product development? So a really good reason to do it is you have a very high level question about your users' motivations, needs, and pain points. For example, when I worked at Google, why do these people spend their personal time for free answering questions for other people, right? Like, why are you into that? That's a great reason to do a user interview, and you can get a lot of really good insights that way. You have something like very specific that you have a problem with and you want to improve it, but you don't know how. Another reasons to do user interviews are maybe you have a lot of assumptions about who your customers are, but not everybody agrees. Like, so-and-so over there thinks that they're this way, so-and-so over there thinks they're another way. Let's go talk to people and determine, it's probably somewhere between, but let's go out and determine kind of where that lives. And then maybe also you just need some inspiration. Customers are really, if you care about people that you're serving, they can just give you inspiration about what to design and how to improve their lives. So sometimes I just really appreciate that. So let's go out, and I'm just going to walk you guys through a quick case study on using user interviews. So I'm Danika, or you can imagine yourself, you're responsible for coming up with the next phone for your company. That's what you've been requested to do. Hey, that's a great open-ended problem. I'm going to go out and I'm going to ask people what to build, and I'm going to make it better. Let's do some user interviews. So let's say you go out, you meet your customer, and you're like, hey, what kind of phone do you want to buy? That's your question you ask them, right? You're doing a user interview, and they say, hey, I want a red phone. You're like, oh my God, that was so easy. They told me they want red phones. I'm going to go make a line of red phones. We're going to build them. It's going to be great. You come back and you go, hey, you wanted a red phone. I built you a red phone. Now you can buy it. And they say to you, I didn't want a red phone. And you're like, what? I asked you what you wanted, and now you don't like my phone? You told me what you wanted, and they went out and built it. And now what? And this happens all the time, right? So here's a couple things to remember about user interviews. One, it is not your user's job to tell you what they want. It's not your user's job to tell you what to build. It's also not their job to tell you what you should do to make them buy your product. That's your job, right? It's your job to be the leader. It's your job to be the person coming up with the ideas. So when you think about that, it's your job to ask people why, to uncover the underlying needs that they actually have. Two, it's your job to uncover what motivates them, what is important and relevant to their lives. And three, it's your job to come up with the solutions. And the users will tell you solutions, they will tell you ideas. That doesn't mean it's the right solution. So be wary of what they tell you. It's your job though to uncover the underlying need and then go back to the drawing board with your product teams and figure out what you could build that would make their lives better. So let's go back to our chat we had. So, hey, tell me what kind of phone you want. They say, I'd like a red phone. A really quick and easy thing to do is go, can you tell me why you want a red phone? And they'll say something like, because I need to find it on my nightstand at night. You're like, oh, that's a very different problem than a red phone, right? But when we ask people why, we uncover, hey, I could actually design a really neat solution that would improve their evening experience with their phone. So again, our goal is to get to what's motivating them, what their problems are, and then you can go back home and try and solve the problems. So here's a couple of quick tips about doing a user interview. Here's some do's and don'ts. So you're going to do a user interview. A really important thing is to say, hey, can you tell me about a specific time, preferably the most recent, because recency is easier for people to tell you authentically what happened. Can you tell me about the last time you did that? Ask why a lot. And I'll repeat this a few more times. Why? Why do you want to do that? Why is that important to you? Listen for and ask about what matters to them. Someone might say something like, oh, blah, 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 my kids. Tell me a little bit more about your kids. So finding things that they seem passionate about and asking and following up in that area is really helpful. Another really great thing to do in an interview is show some ideas. Let them talk for 45 minutes and they use the last 5 minutes, say like, I'm gonna put some stuff out here. Let me know what you think. Here's some things not to do in a user interview that will produce poor data for you. Ask them if they like it. If you say, do you like it? They will feel bad saying they do not. So we always say, let's look at this. Tell me if this would help you solve your problems or if it wouldn't. Don't ask them to project. Someone might say in an interview, oh, I'm not really into red phones, but my grandma, she'd really like a red phone. People don't know how other people want or act. If I wanted to sell something to their grandmother, I would go ask their grandmother what they would like. And then please don't ask your users to predict the future. No one can predict the future. So if you say, if this was on the market, would you buy this? And someone says yes, it's not really great data, and don't take that back to your company and hoping that it'll influence somebody. So here's one quick case study I just wanted to share with you guys that happened when I was at Google. Whenever people would ask people who came to visit the Google Help Center, is this a useful place? Is this content helpful? People would always say, I'm a visual learner. I would like more video. I would like something to look prettier. I wanted to have more pictures. I wanted to have more videos. So the Google team that when I worked there went out and spent a ton of money buying or making videos, showing people how to do things with whatever technology they had. This was not a small effort, right? It takes a lot of money to create videos. They had to localize them into different languages. It was a big problem. But again, they said, everyone says video, we're gonna go do video. They built this video and the click rates came back and nobody was watching them. Nobody was like, they'd see the content, they'd visit, they'd leave, and they just would never watch the videos. So when we did research on this, we actually put it in front of people and said, hey, let's just say you're trying to solve this problem with Google Drive. Let's open up this help center content, read through it, and then, let's try and fix the problem you're having. people would never click the videos in user testing. And we would say, thank you, you solved the problem. Why didn't you watch the video? People said, oh, video's slow. It takes way too long. And also, I'm on my phone probably. My kids are running around. The minute I start playing video, they're over my shoulders thinking I'm watching TV. Like, video is not a great medium for solving problems. So again, this is like one of those case studies where people just, when they ask the customers, what do you want? They said something. We put them in the situation. It just didn't work out, right? So a lot of times you're doing user interviews, you're asking, how last time you had this problem, how did you solve it? Can you show me it? Can you show me, bring up the website? Let's walk through it. All of those opportunities are really important because that's when you get data about the pain point. Like the biggest pain point people had was just finding the content at all. The content was great, but they just couldn't get to it. And then we had a problem to solve. Then me and my team could go back and try and fix stuff. Does anybody have any questions before I pop into the next section?
How do you find the people to interview?
Yeah, this can be easy and this can be hard. There are lots of public places you can go. You could post on Reddit. You can contact people on LinkedIn, right? If you want to get scrappy, there's nothing that keeps you in the way from finding your users. There are formal places you can pay companies, like there's companies like respondent.io that allows you to source people and pay them for their time. That's a great tool. User interviews is also a great panel tool that's been really helpful in the past for us. There's also big companies that you could go and create. If you needed to talk to the CEO of XYZ, that'll pay for you. But for getting a hold of your end-to-end users, you can get scrappy. You can ask for friends and family to give you some advice. Your coworkers, if you want to talk to a Splunk lover, I can just ask people at Splunk, does anybody know anybody who looks like this? And people will help you out. So get scrappy, but this is a really great tool to break away from everyone always says, I want video. Like when you talk to people and you get out in front of them, you're going to get better answers than when you hear the pejorative answer of what you think everybody's going to tell you. So here's a couple of other tips that I just wanted to say. These are really important for you to be able to conduct good user interviews. One, have an interview guide. You are not talking to customers. You are not chatting with customers. You are interviewing them, which means you should have respect for their time and you should be organized ahead of time. What do you want to learn? How would you learn it? And what questions would you ask them? It seems very formal and I just want to sound casual and cool. But again, you want to answer questions. This is not a chance to as we were talking earlier, to get another friend on LinkedIn. This is an opportunity for you to learn something. So use the time really effectively. Second thing, get them to show you. An observation is worth 1,000 interviews, right? So if you can get somebody to say, can you just pull up your screen and show me, or can you talk me through and show me last time you did it, you'll get a lot of really great data. Play naive. You guys are experts in your space often. So you're talking to people who you guys are like, oh yeah, totally. We work at Splunk, right? And someone goes like, security is hard. And I go, yep, security is hard. And I move on. No, I say, really? So you think security is hard? Tell me about why it's hard. I know why security is hard, but I want to know for them why it's hard, right? So we're always trying to just take away our biases and say, you tell me about you because I'm interested in your individual personal perspective on this problem. Again, please ask why. You never really truly understand somebody until you've asked it a bunch of times, not once, not twice, maybe 3 or 4 times. You'll actually get to the root of why people are doing the things they do. And this is one of my little trips. Try and parrot how they talk. So you have your own internal language you use about products. Your customers are out there and they don't use that words. We acquired a company a while ago called SignalFX. And sometimes I'll pop into a customer interview. We call our product now Splunk Observability. And they'll say, well, I was in SignalFX the other day. And I don't correct them. I just keep calling it SignalFX for the rest of the interview because that's how they talk about it inside of their company. If you want them to talk to you like they trust you, you have to respect them and let them be the smartest person in the room for this interview. And so real quick, I want to jump back to this conversation about designing phones. So here are actually, don't ask them, what kind of phone do you want? Here's some really great questions you would ask somebody. Can you tell me about where and how you use your phone? Can you show me? I'd ask somebody, when's the last time you were really upset with your device? What happened? How did you react? What did you do? What did you do to solve it? Or tell me, what's your favorite part about the product? When do you feel happy about this purchase? So these are great interview questions where you're going to get really rich data, and you're going to start to build up an understanding of this user and what they want from your product that you wouldn't get if you just asked them what would make them buy their phones. So again, you can see the difference between that interview and this interview, and suddenly you're swimming in useful insights about how to make your product better. Okay, before we jump into the next section about how we analyze and look at this data, does anybody have any questions or feedback about actually conducting interviews with people?
You found that people are generally open to being recorded for things like that?
You know, it's up to you. So this depends on your organization, depends on your company. We have an NDA that's required, right? Because it protects us and it protects them from, you know, like it mentions, we're not going to use your video recording in a public place, right? It's marketing protection for them. It also says to them, though, if they tell us something super interesting, we're allowed to use it and take action on it. So work within your company's guidelines, treat people ethically and legally. You know, and this is the same thing. We often incentivize people, like we'll give them $100 to talk to us for an hour. Their time is valuable. Depending on where you are in your organization, that might be available. But, you know, set it up. And, you know, you're interviewing them. This isn't a chat, right? So it's okay for it to be formal. And it's okay for you to take those actions and let people know, we're going to sign this NDA. I'm going to record it. Just me and my team are going to watch it so that I can make sure I have it all taken. But like recording it, it's important, right? Because then we can go back, we can review it, we can pull clips if we want to. So, but again, if you preface it with like, I'm respecting you and you're respecting me, I think the video recording isn't usually a problem. The most somebody might say is, can you stop recording while I show my screen? Happy to, like they can show us, walk us through their Splunk instance. We'll turn back on the recording when they start talking. So we're not recording anything confidential. We're only recording kind of the conversation and what they're sharing. Good question though. And again, be really respectful with people because, you know, again, they're sharing with you insights about their lives. I'll be sure to share these decks. I don't think this is anything proprietary at this time, so you guys can go ahead and steal all of my great user interview tips, and happy to help you guys. So first, let's talk about data. 59.4% of statistics are made up on the spot, just so you guys know, this one included. Statistics are usually talking about data. You're always talking about like, how do I get the best data to convince people of what I want to do. For a user interview, a good study often is 8 to 10 interviews. If you can get 8 to 10, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm pretty confident you guys are going to come up with some pretty consistent, high value data that lets us know what direction to go in or what problems to solve. You might be sitting there going like, but Danika, 8 people is not statistically significant. I know that, and I didn't even take statistics. But remember, we didn't pick, and I showed you that user research matrix a long time ago. It's because there's lots of methods out there that are really great for statistically significant data. If you've got 3 features and you got to decide, I can only build one of these 3, which one's the biggest impact? I wouldn't do a user interview to figure out what that is. I would choose a more rigorous method. User interviews are super great though for certain types of research. They're really great for building empathy and understanding what your user's experience is like. They're really great for creating a comprehensive list of pain points. They're good for getting insights on how real users are behaving with your product out in the real world. They're good for finding opportunities that are really rich for innovation. And they're very valuable for determining what motivates people. Sometimes I talk to our customers at Splunk, and you know what motivates them? Because often our teams are tools teams who like deploy Splunk to their software developers. They want to have a really good internal survey score when you ask your company, I have the tools I need to do my job. That score on their like yearly employee satisfaction survey is the question that they care about. They don't care about how to set up administration and RBAC. They care about making sure their teams are happy. And knowing that motivation allows me to design products that are focused on the goal, which is them providing a great product for their customer. So again, you're really trying to understand people's motivations, not just the button, the thing they want to click on a UI or the very concrete problem they have to solve. Remember, in user interviews, they're not quantitative. These are not quantitative analysis tools. You can't determine what is the most important, the most painful, because that's not the type of method this is. They're not definitive, right? These are qualitative, casual, or not casual, important conversations you're having that help you, that you can derive insight from, but you're not going to build your roadmap off of. And they're not the only tool, right? So if you're feeling like, okay, got a lot of great data, and now I need to feel more, I need to get more concrete, chat with your research team, look up other methods, figure out if a survey or something more rigorous would help you guys move forward and turn these into action. And so for user interviews, we talk about data, and data can look like a lot of different things. It could be a quote, it could be a story, it could be a pain point, it could be a need, it could be an idea. So it's not going to look like ones and zeros and twos and threes, and you're not going to be able to put it into Excel and analyze it specifically, but it might look closer to a post-it or a saying or a sentence. And unstructured data is actually relatively hard to analyze, but briefly, if you were going to do this, and this is just an example of what one might look like, and you can do this in FigJam, you can do it in Miro. There's lots of tools. You could do it in Excel. You could do it in Google Slides if you want to. You could do it in a Google Doc, right? You just got to put stuff into a place and then organize it. Your best thing you can do is after your interview, create a list of highlights, which will be your data points. Like, these are the important things I want to take away from this hour-long conversation with somebody. You want to label and group them, like, oh, here's everybody talking about problems they're having with connecting with their community members. Here's problems they're having with maybe they're having a problem with accessing documentation or consistency, right? Here's a bunch of stories we heard about that. And then look for findings and themes in there. Wow, it sounds like everybody is having problems with SEO, or everybody's really struggling because they are finding conflicting information in two places and don't know what's accurate, right? Like, we can go and solve that, but that's like a concrete theme or finding that you guys can go out and work on for your teams. And then don't forget, you have to apply on top of it product and market knowledge. When I worked at Waymo, every customers would complain about routing that the self-driving car would take, right? So Waymo is a self-driving car company that's part of Google, and they would hate the routes, right? But Waymo chose routes that were the safest. So no matter if you liked it or you didn't like it, that was kind of what it was. So when you applied on top of it, the engineering limitations, the product requirements, our marketing stories, we weren't actually going to change it in the way that the customers changed it. It was a communication problem, not an engineering problem. So once you get that data, again, you can't just go back to your product team and be like, everybody wants this. They said it. This is the most important thing, because again, you have to trade effort versus impact and figure out how to move forward with that. So just remember, these interviews are supposed to give you guidance. They're supposed to help you along the way. They're supposed to help you connect with your customers and find out what matters. And then you have to come up with a roadmap that works for them, plus your business, plus your product. So that's it. That's all I have for today. You can go forth and listen and come up with great interview protocols and go talk to your customers in ways that feel productive and empowering. And I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. I can go back to any slides if anybody missed them as well, if that helps. Yeah.
Does the type of questions you ask change based on the stage you're at? Like, i.e. ideation versus a prototype?
I have to guess that, so when you're going in to talk to somebody, the reason you have the interview protocol, right, is because it's supposed to connect the questions to your goal, right? Like, people go like, I'm just going to go talk to some customers. You shouldn't be wasting your customers' time with a talk. You should go to them going like, okay, my product needs to make a decision and we don't have enough data to do it. We don't have anything in the backlog to help people with this problem. I need to go out and figure out what's really going on, right? So if you're going in with a purpose, you should have a set of questions that will guide your conversation to answer those. So if you're coming to them with a prototype, you're a lot farther along than if you're coming to them with like, what's wrong today? What should we build? Like, here's a thing we built. Let's talk about it. You definitely would have different questions for that. So it's a great question. And as you go through your process, you probably would evolve. And actually, something else I recommend is after you've done, especially your first 1 or 2 interviews, sit down with your protocol and say, am I getting data that's useful? And should I adjust this? Is this question working? Is this protocol working? Is this, maybe you have like a little activity you're doing. Is this working? And it's totally okay as you go along to refine, update, cut things out that aren't working, add some stuff in that's working. Usually in a good interview, I also find sometimes you find like a great question, like, man, this question is delivering. And then, like really trying to highlight spending quality time interviewing people in that area, that'll show up as you go through the process. So stay flexible, and you should be able to kind of refine and get the data you need.
I really like that point of like staying flexible, because I think in previous times I'm like, oh, I have to stick to the same questions for everybody's interview. And so
yeah, and I think also, again, like, you can't have the same conversation with everybody because it's a conversation, right? You're not, if you just had a bunch of questions you needed answered to them, email it and let them type it out, right? You're there to ask why, to maybe go in a direction that one person wants to care about, and then the conversation someone doesn't. We were doing research at AT&T on their call center experience, and we got into this interview, and this guy was real. He talked to us about his AT&T call center experience. It was fine. But this guy would not talk about anything but refereeing basketball. That was like his passion. And so I got him. I was like, have you ever, like, and then he says like, oh, I got these shoes. And then I had to go back to the store and get it. Like, let's talk about that support experience, because clearly you don't want to talk about anything else. And actually, we got some really rich data about what mattered to him, what motivated him, the lengths of effort he would go through to get his problem fixed. So again, like, sometimes letting the user let you know what's important to them, but then remembering, like, at the back of your mind, I care about support. That was what we were studying. So we're going to talk about support and the thing that he cared about. And it ended up being a useful interview, even though it didn't seem like you wanted to tell us anything about what we thought we were there to talk about. So again, that's like an art, right? And I can tell you what, if you get good at user interviews, you'll be better at with your partners, you'll be better with your parents, you'll be better with your kids. This is a skill that works on everybody.
I love that. Centers asks, how do you catalog your video sessions, clips, etc., for quick reference?
Hey, Chris, nice to see you. It's been a really long time. So there's lots of tools you can use to organize and categorize video. At our company, our team has fallen in love with a company called Redux. So if anybody hasn't used it, once we started using it, everybody's addicted to it. It's relatively inexpensive to get a license for it, and we found them to be a really effective tool. Qualtrics, which is a much more expensive tool, has some similar features and functionality that's coming down the pipeline. It allows you to cut clips, organize into a group, analyze those videos, maybe take some notes alongside them. You can export reels, which is really great and really helpful. People do more complex stuff, like you can always download your videos, get them into iMovie and stuff like that. But there's some tools out there today that are just making video analysis way faster, way easier. And again, it's nice to invite your stakeholders in, let them watch a couple of the videos live, watch a minute clip of this, 30 seconds of this, to kind of get them into that empathy moment. We've really, really appreciated that. And again, we've just started using it, and the whole research team adopted it so quickly because it was so easy and so fast.
Very cool, thank you.
Yeah, you got it. I thought about mentioning that company in there, but yeah, I would thank the person who introduced us to this guy named Ryan. He was really helpful, and that was a really great resource that he invited us to participate in.
Yeah, right now I just end up saving out clips and then filing them under like product categories in Google Drive, and then just sharing out the relevant ones. But it's like, when, like a stakeholder is like, what do we know about how we arrived at this conclusion? And I'm like, all right, I got to go back to this time and then pull that clip, and then this is where we changed, and like show the whole evolution. And it's just kind of a tedious.
So tedious. I think people avoided video. Oh, darn, they didn't let me record it. I don't have to rewatch it and deal with all of that. But hopefully, again, like, video is really important and really impactful when talking to stakeholders. So anything you can do to just pull out your best clips and get them out there, it's worth the time, but it can be a very cumbersome, heavy media format to work with.
We have Catherine in the chat who said, I've always found it helpful to write down my goals and why the team wants to run the research before you write up your questions. The goals help me figure out what questions should be asked. But on that note,
and so if you guys can Google, like, look up a research plan, right? What's an interview? Like, you can just Google up a template and pull from somebody else. A lot of the companies who build tools like User Interviews or DScout might have templates that you guys could steal from. So don't feel like you have to invent it if you don't need it. You can definitely find all those resources online.
I find that, like, in previous times that I've done user interviews, I think I come in with a bias of like what I assume will be the outcome. And my questions are then geared to like suss out that bias. But how do you get around that?
Oh, we have a joke in the company whenever someone says, I'm going out to validate my idea. I'm like, That's not what we do. We evaluate ideas and then we determine if they're good based on the data we collect. Being unbiased is so hard, right? Because we are very often attached to our outcomes, right? We want the thing we design, we want the thing we think is important to be the thing. It's a really good idea. Invite in somebody who disagrees with you. Like maybe you have a stakeholder and the reason you're doing the interview is because they go like, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't want to spend our time on it. You're like, well, come watch. Like, let's go figure it out together, right? Because then you're both kind of balancing it out. If you ask questions that aren't leading and you're making sure you're asking like, tell me about this. Let's walk through this. Trying to have that objective perspective will really help you. And again, be aware of your own bias. If you're going in and you write down, like you're mentioning, like having a research plan, you can write down hypotheses. Like our hypothesis is that people are going to rank this thing to be the most important. Be sure acknowledging it ahead of time, and it allows you to develop a protocol that either has to be more objective and stuff too. But again, this is something, again, watch for it, try not to do it. And again, as you write your interview protocol, whenever I'm reviewing protocols for the team or a designer maybe who's doing some of their own research, that's one of the things I'm reading for. So get some feedback. It's great to ask for help from your research team or from other people to go like, can you just read through this and make sure I don't have any leading questions? That second set of eyes can really help. Yeah.
Data. So you had a slide that was like, oh, you should pull out themes and yeah, this is like the thing I struggle with the most, I think. Do you have any suggestions on like getting better at analyzing unstructured data?
We just had in our research team, me and the other research manager, we actually did a whole section just for our researchers on how to develop an insight, right? Like what's really insightful? Like, is it interesting? And when you're doing unstructured data and you start to find themes, the biggest thing to ask yourself is, so what? You found something and someone said something and you're finding this little group in here. Say, like, so what, Danika? Like, why does that matter? Because that'll push you to go, well, why does it matter? Oh, because we're trying to make, it brings you back to the decision you're trying to make, right? And you look at the data with fresh eyes and you go, okay, if the goal is to determine if we should make a bunch of videos or if we should invest in our help content or SEO, go back and you say like, so what, people are doing this thing, right? So and that will help you look at the data with purpose versus organizing it and grouping it. Because like, again, grouping it together is interesting, but making it actionable is trying to apply it to the product decision you're trying to make. So a lot of the good work that you did up front to structure your interview, to design your research plan will help you with the analysis as long as you keep on bringing it in. So that's one of my tips. The other thing about it is, pick a medium that works. Like Reduct is a great analysis tool because it allows you to work with video, but it can also be overwhelming, right? Sometimes you just want to like take your top 12 bullet points and organize them. And then this is something too, is if it seems obvious, that's okay, right? Like if you're finding a bunch of people talking about the same thing, it's okay for you to be like, I kind of already know what everybody's saying here. Like you don't need to spend a bunch of hours trying to make it into something that's not. It's okay if everybody's like, yeah, I don't like it. You're like, hey, nobody likes it. Let's just move on and kind of take that for point. But this is actually one of the hardest parts of the process. It's more time consuming than you expect. And when you start to get to 8 to 10 interviews, you have 8 hours of like unstructured data and conversations with people, it can become really cumbersome. So yeah, don't be too hard on yourself when you're trying to do this. This is a really hard process, but you get better at it the more you do it. Yeah, right. But if you conducted great interviews, the better, actually, and this is it too, the better, whenever we get to this stage and it's going poorly, whenever I pull back up that research plan, I go back to the research questions in the beginning and say, why did we do this in the first place? We might find out those were bad, right? So if this sounds hard, make sure you go back to the beginning and say, why am I here? What's the point? Because that, again, those two things this will be very hard if you didn't have a purpose. It's also, this is a really fun activity to do with a group. We were just doing some analysis yesterday and we all were watching videos and we're all talking about what it means. And at the end of it, I was like, this was my favorite thing I did today. So again, really fun as a group. It's a really fun activity. Invite other people to help you out because you will find more interesting things if you can talk about what, so what, why are we learning this? What can we do with it?
Does anybody else have any? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just gonna say, the last couple of times that I had stakeholders participate in like affinity mapping, it's like they now have more buy-in, like they're more attached to the outcome, which I think is helpful versus like just showing up and being like, here's what we figured out.
Absolutely. Invite people along to your interviews, invite them to your synthesis. It's more, you'll get your work done faster, you'll get better data, and they'll have more buy-in for sure.
I'm kind of curious how you deal with user interviews with relation to like the stakeholders, where oftentimes I feel like I get asked to help make a decision that's kind of already been made. And it's, for myself, I can say, no, I'm evaluating, not validating. But when you're coming from it at a point where the stakeholder has kind of already made the decision, and you're just trying, you're trying to evaluate it fairly, but that there's a bias of someone, above you. How do you kind of deal with that place?
Well, one, it's okay for your hypothesis to be right? It's okay for you to evaluate something and then find out, yep, you're on the right track. This is great. Especially if you work in enterprise products, right? Like we spend a lot of time with our customers, right? We often are also a lot like them, right? Because we run software companies too, that we're not off. Like we're not usually like, oh my God, we're trying to make red phones, but people want purple phones. Like that's not usually happens. We're usually kind of going down the right track already. Maybe want some realignment. I think before you start doing interviews is really make sure like what is up for debate. What questions, like, and this is like a little bit of that stakeholder interview up in front, is like, what are we unsure about? What questions do we have? Is it the final design iteration or is it the direction? So the more you want to do up front to try and make sure that you've narrowed down what you're focusing on will help you focus your interviews. And again, like if you find something that is a red flag, you're like, whoa, we were doing this interview on a feature we were working on at Splunk. We went out to customers and they were like, it just didn't land. Like the designs didn't land, the concept didn't land. They're like, no, we definitely wouldn't use it. We went back to our PM and we moved it back a year in the roadmap, right? And I was really impressed with the product team who said like, if customers aren't feeling it, like we're not going to spend time building it and designing it and putting it in here. And I was really, really proud. But again, we brought back really compelling data. So again, that's not usually what happens. And it's not like we said it was a bad idea. We just said they're not ready. Like ML in this area, like they're like, don't trust it, don't want it. But again, in a year, 2 years, like now we got ChatGPT running around, maybe people are ready for ML, right? But at the time they were like, can you just make this thing over here a little bit more obvious how to use, right? Like we were still trying to narrow it down and figure out what's important. So it can be hard, but again, trust your product team that if you did go out and find data that was contradictory to where you were going, that they would listen. And again, if you had 8 people who sat down and said like, nope, this isn't it, you can go back and say, I think we might want to think about this. Yeah, so there's a question in the chat here about putting together who you want to talk to with your product. And this really depends on what you're studying, right? So the very first question people ask is like, how do you get a hold of people, right? If you become like, I have to have people in every single age demographic, I need a perfect mix of male and female, and I need them to have all these perfect criteria, you might never start your project, right? Because you're like, I can't find my 10 needles in the haystack, right? You're like, so don't let recruiting be a barrier to get out there and start talking to people, right? Usually what you want to do is come up with a general perspective where it goes, there might be 2 people out in the world with very different perspectives on this problem, right? Like we've got SREs and we have people who do DevOps. We want to make sure I talk to both of those people because they're going to have different perspective on this feature, right? So I want to make sure I have some combination of those people in there. Do that, like definitely say like, would 2 people have a different perspective? If so, try and get a hold of both of them. But again, don't be so stringent in your interview process that that they wouldn't. Because often you also see people be like, oh, I have to talk to all these different demographics. And you go like, oh, you know, these two people are probably the same. These ones are kind of the same. So definitely just try and target people who are going to give you different perspectives. Another technique you'll see in user interviews is people love to talk to extreme users. So, right, you talk to like 6 to 7 people who are kind of in the middle, and then you talk to your like off the charts person, because they're usually really inspiring. Everything that everyone else does a little bit, the person over on the spectrum is like super interesting. Like, you know, like I'm like, what do you mean? Like these people who used to answer questions in the Google form, what do you mean you spend 12 hours a day in this forum answering questions for free? Like, loved him because he told me why at max, why all those other people were motivated, right? So you can learn really quick from them. Did I design for him? Probably not, right? Because he's kind of an anomaly, but he inspires me to understand what intensity looks like. It's very inspirational. You'll find lots of interesting tips and ideas and cool stuff from them. But again, at the end of the day, you're kind of designing for your, you know, the person who's going to pop in for a couple hours a day and answer a handful of questions and trying to make their lives a little bit easier.
Before we get to Chris's question in the chat, I just like it popped into my mind about when I was designing community programming, and we had a hypothesis of who we wanted to design for. And so we got, you know, we had 10 interviews, and we designed for the information we got in those interviews. But what was great was we were able to test and iterate. And a lot of community work is that, like, you use your user interviews to get off the ground. A V1 of a program, it's not going to be like in one of your slides, you said, you know, it's not going to be your roadmap. And I think that that's a good thing to keep in mind.
We have a study that's going on right now, and we're doing 2 interviews a week. So we're 2 interviews, do some work, 2 interviews, do some work, right? So again, like these studies are flexible, and again, like depending on what you're trying to study, you know, sometimes you don't even need 10 people, right? Sometimes you just want 1 or 2 and kind of iterate and use that time effectively. We don't have endless time, right? I can't do 50 interviews. Whenever somebody puts a plan together, like, I'm gonna do 50 interviews, I was like, I'll see you next year. Like, you're never gonna be done. So again, be flexible with yourself and just know, like, data is data. You're happy to get it. If you only get 4, don't trash the project, right? Like, see what you can get from that. Identify where you're not feeling confident and try and get some more, but like use what you have. And again, assume that the data you're getting is still going to help you in the way you need it to. But again, like these real life scenarios, like studies never go the way you want them to, right? Even when you have a very generic screen, you're like, I just need people from, you know, 18 to 64 who have an Android phone. You'll be surprised how hard it can be sometimes to get people just to spend the hour with you.
The question in the chat was thoughts on general recruitment in parentheses, minimal criteria versus recruiting based on product personas.
Yeah, again, like this has to do with, like, again, your research questions, right? You go back and you say, when we have, here's a good example at our company, right? So I ask people all the time, do I need to have a Splunk person use this? Or do I need to have just somebody who understands any SRE? Like, is that good enough? Or do they have to be a user, an SRE who uses Splunk? And we might talk about that, being like, what we're studying. Are we studying like a pain point we have today with the product that somebody has to have experienced? That's a hard recruit. If we just need somebody who generally does this and we can explain to them the pain point and they'll understand it, then it's actually probably a lot easier. So be, again, really ask yourself, like, is having a specific person going to add value? Sometimes, especially in very foundational, very open-ended research, you might be really clear you want to get like 2 people from each of your 4 persona groups because you're doing some discovery research. If you're doing something that's maybe a little bit more focused on pain points, you might be able to be a little bit more generic and flexible. So be wary of over restricting yourself on who you're supposed to talk to for the sake of your own time and sanity.
Well, I don't know about y'all, but I took so many notes. I feel like this was one of those ones, I don't know if other community leaders feel like this, but when you put together a session that's like kind of for you, this is what that was for me. I took a ton of notes and hopefully y'all got the value that you needed as well. For those who aren't in the Uncommon Slack, we do have a Slack group for these types of discussions around community, marketing, DevRel. So please feel free to join Slack if you're not already in there. But just a huge thank you to Danika for coming by. And where can we find you after this session?
I'm on LinkedIn. It's the best place to connect with me. I love sharing my thoughts and ideas on research. I love helping people too. Like, I think research is a really complex area, but again, nothing upsets me more than watching people waste time with customers by having bad interview protocol. So go out there. I really just want people to be empowered. None of this is proprietary. So again, it's all about finding your people and getting in touch with them. And actually, I just love that everybody's out there talking to customers, right? That really matters. But just do it with purpose, right? Go out and be awesome. So yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn if you're curious. And again, use the internet. There's tons of great resources out there for user interviews and for other research methods as well. So you keep learning. It's such an inspiring area.
Thank you. I feel like some of the things that you said are just so second nature to you, but even just like I wrote down some things to Google later and I was like, oh, this is probably just second nature to you, but I wouldn't have known to Google it. So yeah, thank you so much.
You got it. I'm very happy to share. It was super fun. It was fun to put the deck together and also just fun to share some stories as well. I'm kind of passionate. Not sure if you guys noticed.
Appreciate it. Well, thank you everyone for coming and we'll see you next time.
Nice to see everybody. Have a great day.